Welcome to the Arete Podcast, the podcast created to help senior executives and the organisations they lead live up to their full potential. Join us for cutting-edge interviews with leading senior executive and board members across all industry sectors, and for practical tips to accelerate your executive career. And now, here's your host, Richard Triggs.
I have you along for the Arete Podcast. I was thinking that you and I have known each other for 11 years, and I can't believe that I haven't invited you to be on the podcast before. So it's great to finally get there.
You save the good guest for later on, right? Or something along those lines. Yeah.
Exactly. And so we first met. I've spoken about doing this program, Key Person of Influence, on the podcast, occasionally over the years, but when I met you, I was doing this program and you were mentoring the team of students in relation to publishing. Mm-hmm. And that really inspired. And then you coached me through writing both my first book and my second book, for which I'll be forever grateful. But your life has been way more than being an author. So why don't we just start off, just give people a sort of a quick glance into the Andrew story and how you got to where we are today.
All right. So the short version is I started my kind of work life, I guess you'd say. I bought my first business when I was 17. So I bought a dive shop, and so I was professional diver by trade, and I thought I'd buy a dive shop. And at 17, when you know everything, it's a pretty important kind of time frame. So, of course, the dive shop was a major success from day one. No, it wasn't. It was a disaster, but I kind of navigated my way through, learned a whole pile of stuff. And then after the dive shop, I taught survival skills for Rio Tinto in WA, and I was a field assistant over there. Then I ended up in Cairns, again, from a diving point. I'm giving you the micro version here. I was ended up in Cairns, where I was working for a company putting in pontoons on the Great Barrier Reef, and I got decompression sickness. So that kind of ended my diving career as such. And it was a Japanese company, MYK Shipping, that I was working for, and they said, "Look, you got a big mouth. We'll put you into sales and marketing." And so next thing I've become, and I resisted it, of course. I was a diver, and next thing I'm wearing a 3-piece suit and traveling around the world as their sales guy. So I did that for about 5 years, and it was quite amazing, to be brutally honest. And working for a Japanese company was really interesting and insightful as well. And then I left there and I started my own little marketing company again in Cairns. And I did that for a number of years, and I just started to notice that I was having the same conversations day in, day out with my kind of clients, and I thought, well, this is a waste of time. I need to save time. So I started writing information sheets to answer questions that they would all have. One day I thought, I've got 50 of these little info sheets. Maybe I'll do another 50, put them together, and I'll write a book called 101 Ways to Market Your Business. And so that's what I did. And this is 25, 26 years ago. And I sent it off to a publisher. They said it was terrible, but they knew another publisher who might want to publish it. They sent it across for me, and I got a phone call from Alan and Unwin, a guy called Ian Bowring, and it was a fabulous phone call, Richard, because I've answered the phone, and the line that he said was, we're chatting, and he goes, "Okay, Andrew, I've got your manuscript in front of me. It looks like it was written by a drunken, dyslexic, heroin-addicted chimpanzee."
Well, apparently, if you give them enough time, they can type out the words of William Shakespeare.
Well, exactly, and I think that's what he was insinuating. Right. And I said, "Well, I'm not really sure why we're talking, if it's that bad." And he said, "Yeah, your writing is horrible, but your content is fabulous. Right. We can fix bad writing, but we can't create fantastic content." So they published it, and then I went on to write another 11 books with Alan and Unwin, and which I've got the title of the most number of books ever published in Australia with one publisher by someone. So that's pretty amazing. And then I published another book called The Me Myth with Simon & Schuster, and then I self-published books as well. And so, that started my that 25, 26 years ago was when I really became the author. And that led to me speaking on stages, in Australia and overseas, and really, some extraordinary kind of opportunities that came out of that, working with people like the, European Union and big companies, CBS out of America, and a range of people. And still what I do today, as you know, Richard, is I write books, I speak, teach people to write books. I still, that's my life in the abridged version.
Yeah, well, that's I've heard the longer version a few times, and I've read the Me Myth and a number of your other books. So, very interesting in terms of the fact that you were originally writing books about how to market businesses, and then that sort of turned into how you market yourself as somebody who teaches people how to write books. And then that turns into teaching people, how to market yourself as a public speaker. And so it's funny how, all of these kind of things have compounded. Whereas some other people's careers, it's like, I worked in this and then I worked in that, and they sort of jump around, which yours was a little bit like at the beginning of your career. Yeah. But yours has been a compounding effect rather than a sort of a transferal sort of a pathway.
Yeah, it has. And I think one thing that, a mutual friend of ours, Dave Dugan, and I was having coffee with him maybe, 8 or 9 years ago. And something they said to me was, tell me your career path. And I said, okay, well, when I bought my first business, it was predominantly teaching people how to dive as well as recovering boats and things like that. But I was teaching. Then I was working away in the bush. I was teaching people survival skills in the bush. When I was, putting in pontoons in the reef, I'm teaching other people how to do that. I'm teaching. Then I'm, in the marketing company, I'm teaching people how to market their business. Right through to now, everything I do is teaching. And he said, "You're a teacher." And I went, "Oh, really?" I never, ever saw that in myself. I never, ever would have called myself a teacher, but he was 100% right. And that has been the common thread, that has carried through. And I think that that's why whatever I do, I'm never very far from actually teaching people. And there's a great observation, Richard, about that. It has compounded for me, over the years as well. So, that's makes it easier to build on your previous successes, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because for myself, I've been working with a psychologist for about 4.5 years, and I was talking to him, and my father was a professor. My mother ended up being a clinical nurse educator. She was a nurse, so they were both teachers. And and even though I'm a recruiter, a lot of what I do is teaching. And so he sort of said the same thing to me. Really, Richard, you're a teacher. And it was a massive light bulb moment for me, like you. Yeah, I get it, and which is now why I'm moving into more teaching people how to recruit. Yep. I still own and run a recruitment company, but I have been dating a teacher now for almost a year. And I tell you what, it's a complete aside. I never understood. Like, everybody looks at teachers in schools and they go, "Oh, they've got life so easy. They only work from 9 till 3:30 and they get 13 weeks holiday a year." I've never seen anybody work harder for what is relatively not much money. The workload that teachers have is enormous, and the pressure is incredible. So I'm glad that you and I get to teach, but not in that typical teaching environment of a school. Yeah. And so when I did the KPI program, which was really aimed at probably emerging small business owners and entrepreneurs, the whole concept of being a key person of influence was developing what is now a pretty sort of cliche type term, your personal brand, right? And I remember doing that at the time and thinking to myself, it's not just for business owners to have a personal brand. executives who are looking to fast track their careers and be regarded in their industries as truly, thought leaders or candidates of choice, etc., it's so essential for them to have a strong personal brand. And so what are your views on that? And how, a personal brand can be seen as something that's quite, I don't know, for want of a better term, basic, but it's actually a much more sophisticated thing than that, isn't it?
I think it is, and I think you're right. I mean, the term, build your personal brand has been thrown around a lot over the last, probably 15 years or so when people have started, talking about it. And even I think at the beginning of it, it was almost like people are being a bit egotistical. If you're kind of trying to, say my personal brand is this or whatever it might be. But what I've really noticed, I think in the last, in that time, is the significance and the importance of consciously, working on your personal brand. Because it used to be enough that you could almost position yourself behind your company. If you're working for a large organization, like I would say, I work for NYK. So it's the brand of NYK is, I'm a international sales manager for NYK. All of the meaning and my reputation is on NYK's kind of shingle. Whereas now, we look a lot deeper. We've got a lot more communication tools. There's a lot more social media. There's a lot more profile where us individually, if you're in a corporate space as much as, business space, that there's more opportunity for people to talk about you, to know about you, to see what you do, to see what you don't do, to see what your brand is, what stands for. And if we pick a CEO in particular these days, again, CEO's public-facing role in the past was deal with stuff when the poop hits the fan and report at the annual report by the AGM to talk about, have we made money? What's our EBITs, ERBITs, debits, and to be able to just, tell the financial story of the business. Yeah. Whereas now we've seen CEOs that have destroyed their personal brand by, doing dumb stuff. We see people now that get employed because they've got a good work experience, but their personal brand brings enormous, credibility, and we know those kind of CEOs. That Ziggy from Telstra kind of days in the past is engaged because of what he brings, to the table. So our personal brand, everyone's got one. If you don't define your own brand, other people will do it for you. So we have this, kind of interesting opportunity where we now, as individuals, whatever kind of space that is, where you've got to really make a conscious decision about saying, well, what do I want my personal brand to say about me? What do I want to be known for? All of those things. Whereas in the past, it could be left to its own devices. That is no longer the case.
That's certainly true. And I think, it's a multifaceted coin in that people often go, well, how am I going to brand myself on LinkedIn, for example, in order to get jobs? But the reality is, the other side of the coin is, as a leader, you're not even necessarily the CEO. Even if you're the operations manager, anybody that is looking to come and work for you, especially younger candidates, are researching and looking at your LinkedIn profile, looking at your digital footprint and saying, is this somebody that will develop me to my highest potential? Is this a leader that I really feel that I would benefit from working for because I have a lot of choice? And then you think every supplier, every customer, every joint venture partner, everyone, now is that old marketing term, zero moment of truth, is they are getting a picture of you before they even contact you. What is this guy or this gal's personal brand? So it's so fundamentally critical now. And so, your key areas that you work in is speaking and writing.
Yeah.
So how big a part do you think that those tools play, and how does somebody develop those with true authenticity so they have the greatest impact?
Yeah, and that's a big question, but I think the last part that you said there was really the key to that. That these days it is about that true authenticity, and it's like, when the point you made there before, mate, is such a good one about, say I want to come and work for you and I'm researching you. We connect on LinkedIn. I'm kind of looking at who you are. So yeah, I'm looking at your, credentials or what your history and all of the rest of it. But I'm also looking very much at what are you posting about? What are you adding value to? Like, what are your opinions? What are your views? Like, let's, in the current political state of things, let's say you do a post on LinkedIn, something about Trump, and I'm not doing a judgment call on Trump. I'll let the rest of the world do that. But I'm going to form an opinion based on that post. That might, it's like a website. If you go to a business's website, no website ever goes, well, to be honest, we're okay. I'll use Arete. We're okay as a recruitment company, but in reality, we're probably pretty crap. You know what I mean? Like we've got our good points, but overall, I don't know. If you're desperate, you can use us, right?
We may be slow, but we're expensive.
Yeah, exactly. So our website always goes, we're awesome, we're the best, we're amazing. You're mad if you don't use us, rah rah. But the truth comes out in our social media posts, what we do or what we don't say. So the long and short of it then that comes back to me is when it comes to writing and kind of sharing stuff, a lot of that kind of comes out in your social media. A lot of that comes out even in how you comment and how you provide, I guess you commentate on what other people are talking about. So, how you're sharing that from a writing point of view, let alone even the fact that if you write a book, whether you're a senior executive or whatever it is, that's a great credibility building piece from that point of view. But as a minimum, it's like, well, what are we saying on a day-to-day basis? What are we sharing? What aren't we sharing? And if you're not writing anything or creating any kind of content or sharing any kind of content and commentating on it, well, then people have got to form their own opinion about you. What is it that you stand for? And often that's where it kind of goes wrong. The second part of that, and I'm sure we'll dive into these a little bit more, is that, well, actually, one other part about that is this concept that what you're writing kind of really does help to build, I think, your intellectual authority. Like what is it, that you're doing? It shows your depth, your clarity, your value set, your leadership views, all of those things on a day-to-day basis. Great opportunity to showcase more of what it is you do, what you think about, what you stand for, all of that stuff. So in your example, Richard, about someone who's, looking at people wanting to work with you, forming an opinion about that, you've got to show them that stuff.
Yeah. And the reality, Andrew, is that very, very, very few companies do it well, and virtually no executives do it at all.
Exactly.
It's interesting. Whenever we take a job brief, we'll say at the end, so let's assume that a candidate's working for one of your competitors. They're really happy. They like their boss. They're relatively well paid. Why would they come and give up their job in order to go and work for you? And they go, oh, because we're really good. It's like, well, I think you need to have some more compelling reason now if you're going to attract top talent. And it's not just, as you say, resting on the laurels of the company's reputation. It is very much your own. And I think that, a lot of senior executives get a bit daunted by, well, I don't have the ability or the time to write a book or to go and do keynote presentations. But it's not even really about that, is it? As you say, it's
not. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, no, that's fine. So what do you think some of the mistakes that senior executives make when they're starting to put their mind to, well, what is my personal brand in the market? And particularly, how do they avoid the trap of just being the same as everybody else? A bit like that example. Why would they work for you? Oh, because I'm really good.
Yeah. Well, and that's an interesting one too. Just one thing, just before I dive into that, the second part of that earlier question, where we're talking about the role of speaking, I think that's a really important piece too, Richard, simply because I think, again, it's no longer enough for a CEO, for example, anyone who's an executive, to just get up and report on what is in a report. Now, I mean, a few years back, you and I collaborated and we did a training program on teaching senior executives how to tell stories.
Yeah.
And the whole reason for that was, in a speaking environment, was because they were being asked to tell more than just what's in the annual report. Tell us the story of the company. Tell us how you're navigating the challenges of the GFC or of COVID. Tell us about the vision for the future. Look at, a well-worn path is look at Patagonia. Tell us about, what your future is. All you need is the founder of Patagonia to say, we're about planet Earth is our own shareholder, and you got 10,000 people lining up that want to work for Patagonia because they've expressed their values and what they stand for. And now more than ever, I imagine that again, that point of people want to work for a company that aligns with their values, but they also want to work with individual CEOs or senior, the team members that going, oh, exactly that. I want to know that these people, I'm going to learn, I'm going to become better in myself, but our value set aligns. And that's only going to become increasingly important. So when it comes back to common mistakes, I think that people make, when you're in that executive kind of role, one is doing nothing, because we don't really know what to do. So we have no profile, we kind of hide away. And these days, having no profile, you're almost better off to have a bad profile. You're almost better off to be in the paper for bad stuff than to have nothing in some respects, because if you can't form an opinion about you based on what they can find out, it's not even so much that people will form their own opinion. They just think nothing of you, like you don't even come up on their radar. And I think that's what it's about. I think, in sharing your brand and building your brand, there are so many different elements to it. It is from really what you wear. And then we go, well, that's pretty shallow, isn't it? Well, I'm not here to judge whether it's shallow or not. It's that reality. It's how you carry yourself. It's how you treat others. It's everything that you do forms your brand in one element in the day-to-day side of it. And that's a really interesting kind of piece of the puzzle as well, because we all know people that can have a great kind of, oh, I'm smiling, I'm Mr. Nice Guy, but you ask anyone who works for me and I'm, I'm horrible bastard kind of thing. So how we go through life is important. When it comes to what do we share, that again, it's got to be more than skills. That's important, but often that's what people tend to focus on is either technical stuff or purely regurgitating company stuff, as opposed to more of the humanity, more about the values, the visions, those kind of things as well. So, you go, okay, well, we've got what I look like, how I act, how I go through life. What am I talking about, sharing? What do I stand for? What do I do when I'm not working? What's my not-for-profit? That says a great deal. I turn around and say, well, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is, helping wombats to survive. You know, like, you don't have to do a judgment call about is that a good charity when they're starving kids or whatever, but that just gives an insight into me, And so what building a personal brand about is a lot about letting people in. And I think that often where people are scared of that, Richard. It's like, oh my God, like I've got to open myself up. But I look at it completely different, because I look at my personal brand that I've built, and I say I built my personal brand over the last 59 years. And my personal brand is my strongest, single biggest asset that I have, because my personal brand attracts people to work with me. It gets me through difficult times. It's this thing that has helped me to navigate my life for such a long time. And I would do anything to protect my personal brand. That's how important it is to me. And I don't think it's any different, for whether you're an executive, an entrepreneur, or whatever.
Well, I think one of the things is that it's it's one of the only things you truly have control over.
Absolutely.
So if you're working in an organization and that organization has a brand, that is incongruent with your personal brand, then it's a pretty clear indication that it's probably not the right place for you to play.
Hmm.
And as you were talking, one of the other things I was thinking about is, particularly because, I'm talking now a lot to employers or to executives who are looking for employment opportunities, a big part of your brand is how you've mentored and developed people. And so
Mm.
even sharing those stories of the successes of, those people who have been in your team. So you are by, so in without clearly articulating this person succeeded because of me, there's,
Hmm.
an implied, let me share you the story of the success of this person in my
Mm.
team. People then go, wow, well, if he developed, Mary to achieve those things, imagine what he could do for me. And the other thing, from a speaking point of view, for perhaps sort of mid-level managers, there might not be a lot of opportunity to speak externally, but remembering that you're constantly being pulled into, meetings and leadership retreats, and you might at a more senior level be invited to attend a board meeting and so on,
Yep.
being able to be articulate and stand out from the crowd by having the skills to be able to, as said, Andrew, tell stories rather than regurgitate the facts, is a tremendous advantage
Mm.
professionally.
Yeah, great. And isn't that an interesting thing? Over the years, I've done quite a bit of presence coaching, and the people that have approached me around doing that have said, I'm in my role. I might be GM or what, but relatively senior with an organization, and they're saying that the feedback that they've had is that they lack presence,
Right.
and it's one of those things that they're kind of going, well, what the heck does that kind of mean? And 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 so that their career trajectory is slowing down
Mm.
when really they should be really navigating into CEO roles or other GM role in other bigger organizations or whatever. And the present side of things, and one of the big things I work on with them is exactly that, saying, well, apart from a whole pile of other you know just kind of simple little things like even where you sit in a table, how you greet people, being the last one in the room instead of the first one, whatever that stuff might be. But a lot of it is around teaching them to actually present with confidence, so that again their presence shifts, whether it's talking about a project or it doesn't really matter even what the topic is, but just helping them to develop their speaking skills or their presentation skills, so that they are able to present with authority anytime and in a deeply engaging kind of a way. No doubt at all that that really increases the power of their personal brand within the organization. And I believe gives them far more opportunity for future growth and future, progression up the corporate ladder.
Yeah. Look, but certainly, I'd concur with that, and I
Mm.
see it in my business on almost a daily basis when I'm talking with these people. And so for yourself, I mean, obviously you've written 14 best-selling books, and you've spoken all around the world, and so I mean that's a huge accomplishment, and has taken years to build that momentum and maintain that momentum. So for the executive who's sitting here listening to this podcast today, and they're going, well, I need to, what do they say? 1,000-mile journey starts with the first step.
Yeah.
What are some of the simple things that I can do to just get started?
Well, I think there's probably three things. Number one, I would say, is just decide what your personal brand actually looks like and stands for, and like who are you? What are your values? What are those kind of soft skilly kind of thought things? But we need to know that, like who, and you need to be able to kind of share that with others so that they understand who you are. I think you, I think we've got to define what that looks like. I think the second thing is just start. resharing things even on LinkedIn that are significant, that can be professional, can be in alignment with who you are, what you're doing. Shining the light on other people is always a great thing to be able to do. And you kind of go, how does that help my personal brand? It does. Resharing things of value, saying exactly as you said, Richard, shining the light on team members, shining the light on the things that you're passionate about. If you've got a not-for-profit that you support, getting behind that anything that's going to give people an insight into who you are, starting there is simple enough. And again, that is the hurdle for most people, to go from doing nothing to doing a little bit. We're going, anything you're going to post, before I post anything, my view is always, is this going to be of value? Is this going to be a service to my audience? Okay. And by having that little parameter on there, then I kind of go, okay, well, that means it's going to be good for my personal brand. And the third thing I would say then is the thought of speaking or presenting a lot of the time for anyone, for most people is always a little bit, it's a stressful thing. People are anxious about it or concerned. Is just to start, look for opportunities, as you say, to present internally, to be more aware even of when you're watching other people deliver things in meetings or in formal presentation kind of formats. Start to rather than just be a member of the audience, start to look at how others are delivering. Start to develop your skill set by osmosis. And I think for me that's a little bit like when I read a book. I don't just look at it from the content point of view. I'm looking at what's the cover like, what's it feel like, what structure have they used, what language do they use. As an author, I'm looking for ideas on how I write better. Well, you can observe other speakers and you can learn how to speak. Even this is a little bit old-fashioned, but joining a Toastmaster group. You know what I mean?
Look, I couldn't agree more.
Great organisation.
Yeah, I say to people, joining Toastmasters and achieving what they call competent Toastmaster, which is where you've given 10 talks, and each one they're adding in an additional element. So the first time it's just being able to talk for 5 minutes with no notes. The next time it's using some body language. The next time it's bringing in some emotion and so on. I can honestly say that having done that was far more beneficial to me than doing a university degree.
Yeah. Wow.
And I mean, Toastmasters has been around for so long, and it doesn't seem to really get the sort of bandwidth that it used to. But for people who want to be able to explore speaking in a really safe environment, which has got excellent structure, I can't recommend Toastmasters more highly.
I did Toastmasters. I think I was about 15.
Right.
And I was at school, and it was a bit of a contradiction because I was, wasn't the best student, and I was, running amok at high school, and yet the fascination of that, and what got me in back then early on, Richard, was a guy from Toastmasters came to school and did a presentation for some of us or whatever to talk about Toastmasters.
Right.
And come on. And I just remember he was a kind of short, fat guy. Like even back then for me, I was like 1.5 feet tall, and it was like this unusual looking kind of guy. It was so eloquent and so, everything about it. And he was like the head of the local chapter, and Mr. Davies was his name. And I just remember he just did this beautiful 5 or 10 minute talk about the power of speaking and what it can do for you, rah, rah. And I thought, I've just got to go and learn more about this. And as you say, from a skill set, fabulously helpful for me all my life, and as a professional speaker now, a lot of the passion for it and the learning and that got me down that track, without a doubt, was from, seeing him. But I think Toastmasters is a great one. Even just being a bit braver and putting yourself out there. If there's someone who you go, wow, that person within the organization is a really great presenter, ask them to mentor you, ask them to give you advice, ask them to work with them to find out how they put their structure together. There's always someone within an organization that you go, yeah, they're the best presenter. and probably because they've had a bit of training, they might have a bit of natural flair and ability, whatever it might be. But you can kind of develop those skills. It's like using social media, starting to post, maybe even writing a few of your own kind of articles or views, that kind of stuff. It all starts, as you said before, you start little and you do a little bit by little bit. See, for me now, being many years down the line with that, this concept of building my personal brand is not a chore. It's just something that I do. It's just a natural part. I would never post anything stupid. I would never post anything overtly political, because again, I don't know that that's the environment for that. I'm a big believer on shining the light on others. I have a high level of positivity in what I want to promote, and how what my brand stands for. I'm very consistent in my messaging, those kind of, elements that again, you go, okay, well, I want to start building my brand. They're the kind of things, again, that I think can help, building that in just, in fairly rudimentary, but actually really powerful ways.
Yeah. One of the things, just going back a little bit on what you were saying, about how when you read a book, because you're not only an author, but teaching people to be an author, is you're interested in what, the cover is and what the font sizes they use and all that.
Feels.
So as you develop a sort of a professional expertise, but I think one of the things that you've really impressed me with is your slide decks. And I've always said, I've never seen anybody do slide decks which are as fun and interesting as yours are. Very uniquely yours. And so
part of my brand, right? Sorry, yeah. My slides are an extension of my brand.
So, we will put in some links, and I'd really recommend that, people jump online onto Andrew's website, and even if you just watch one of his talks, just to see his slides, because I think they're just so, it's such a unique and exciting way to present information, and so many people is just so boring. And, I suppose a lot of people are probably listening to this and they're going, look, I'm just so busy. I'm constantly up to my neck in crocodiles. I just don't have the time, or I don't feel ready to put any attention on this. So, but what would you say to them? But also I'd be interested in, what is becoming more and more prevalent now is people are just going, well, I'll get ChatGPT to do it. Right. And I mean, whilst ChatGPT is an awesome tool, it definitely has its constraints, and so I'd be interested in, if they're saying they're too busy, well, what would you say about that? And then, what are your thoughts about how ChatGPT and other similar tools can help and hinder their development of a personal brand?
Yeah, again, two really good questions, and I've heard it so many times. I'm too busy doing what I do to do this stupid personal brand kind of stuff, and look, I get it. I'm a busy guy. I understand that, but the reality is, you got a personal brand whether you want one or not, right? And you choose what that personal brand looks like. So if you do nothing, people will form their own opinion about what your personal brand is, as I was saying before. So to not proactively invest some time, at least, into building your personal brand these days, to me, without being overly dramatic, but it can be, you'll get stuck in your career. I feel it will definitely hinder where you want to go. I think the other thing is that we can be dismissive of it and go, oh, it's all social media claptrap or whatever it is. But as I said, my personal brand, and I think people that get personal branding and consciously build their personal brand understand that it is something that you have to spend time on. You don't have to spend hours a day, but you've got to spend time, and you've got to deeply consider what your personal brand stands for, what it means, all of that kind of stuff. Because done well, it will protect you. It will help you grow your career. It will help you, have more opportunity. It will do such extraordinary things for you. So a well mapped out, clear what you stand for, current, ongoing personal brand that aligns, or nothing. And, which one are people going to be drawn to? Which employers are going to be drawn to that? Which opportunities are going to be drawn to that? So rather than going, okay, it's one of those things that takes up too much time, I'm too busy to do it. It's a lot more about, well, maybe this is something I need to be investing time in because, it's actually important. So there needs to be a little bit of a shift. And I generally find, and very much a generalization, people a little bit older, social media is a waste of time. And it's like, not to a millennial, not to a Gen Z who you may be working for one day. So I think you've got to make the decision that I'm not going to leave my personal brand up to people to try and figure it out. I'm going to proactively drive that, and I'm going to address that in everything, how I act, what my value set is, how I communicate, build my speaking skills, write more, share more, and start as little as I can, but at least start and build that up. The second part of your question there about ChatGPT, such an interesting one as well. And it's early days with AI, as we know. And as a writer, I have a love-hate affair with ChatGPT. As a speaker, I have a love-hate affair with it. As a human being, I have a love-hate affair with it. The problem that I have with ChatGPT is that, like a lot of tools, is people don't really know how to use it terribly well. And because it's new, and I think that will get better. So generally, I can tell when something has been, a piece of writing or a blog post has been created by ChatGPT. And it's very obvious. The challenge comes at if every law firm's marketing person is saying to ChatGPT, I want a 300-word article on the importance of, finding the right litigator when you're, suing your former employer or something like that, right? So everyone is looking for the same kind of article. So the ChatGPT articles are basically identical. And a publisher that I work with said for the first time ever, they had 2 manuscripts come in with the same body of copy in word for word in both, and 2 different books. And that's a total giveaway that it's ChatGPT orientated.
Either that or there's some serious plagiarization going on.
Yeah, someone.
And then you see the ads on Facebook. So let me write your book in one day.
Oh, I know.
And
1 hour now.
Become a best-selling author, in 48 hours. Yeah. And I think, far out, I sweated, there were tears, there were tantrums, as you know, Andrew, because you were my book writing mentor. Writing a book is, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think one of the things that you said to me at the very beginning was, once you've got your plan, you write 1,000 words a day for 30 days, and then you've got a 30,000-word book. And I did that. And now 3 books later, starting to think about my next one. But again, it's not about writing a book. ChatGPT for me is how I tend to use it is I say, I want to write about something. Give me 10 different ideas as to what, to write about. So ChatGPT will give me the idea, but then I write the 300-word LinkedIn post or whatever. Yeah. So to be frank, I'm a slow adopter, and I can definitely see the value. But then I even know that if I ask ChatGPT to write something, it will make something up. Like I'll say, based on my book, chapter 1, give me a 400-word article, and it will say, as I say on page 26, and it will give an actual quotation. Yeah. And I'll go, I didn't write that.
Yeah.
That's not in my book. And so you write back to you say to ChatGPT, did I actually write that? Oh, no, you didn't.
Yeah, I know. It just says, it's like Donald Trump. It just says whatever it likes. But you're right, though. I'm the same. For me, I try to go, okay, how do I use ChatGPT to stimulate thought and ideas, but also to make it better? So I ask it lots of questions about, like, what am I missing in this? Stress test. Is this relevant for 2025 in the current world that we're living in? You know, what are my blind spots when I'm looking at this? And I use it for helping me to develop stuff. You know, use ChatGPT to come up with your develop my personal brand kind of strategy. It'll give you good, solid stuff. But if you want to write content and create individual stuff, ChatGPT is beige, you know, and it gives you homogenizing stuff, which sounds like everyone else's. Yeah. But it's a great tool to be able to help develop that kind of stuff. And how do I differentiate? And here's 300 words that I've written. How could I make it better to make it more relevant for my target market, which is this? Mm. And those little tweaks, it can do that really, really well. And it lies less than if it's working just with your original stuff.
Well, I've just finished listening to a long podcast, and these guys are talking about the evolution of artificial intelligence. And what we're seeing today will be exponentially different within 2 years, within 3 years. So it's such a changing environment. And we could have an entire 10-hour conversation about that because I find it so fascinating. But I know that you've got a hard finish in 5 minutes. So, Andrew, you really appreciate your time. And I just wanted to say on a personal note, much of the success of Arete and my success as a personal brand has come directly from working with you terms of my speaking skills, my writing skills, even my leadership skills. And so, you've been such a instrumental support to me. And so it's just been a great pleasure to have you on today to have this conversation.
Oh, thank you, mate. And it's lovely for me though, too, when I look at you, like I get as much joy out of your latest book, for example, getting published, I think, as you did. Like I saw it in the bookshop in Sydney yesterday. And,
oh, really?
And I kind of, the Kino bookstore in the CBD in Sydney. And
That's
it was
fantastic.
like, oh my God, it's Richard's book. And it was like, I moved it, turned it to the front, and there's half a dozen of them in there. And I'm kind of going, I feel like it's mine.
Right.
I didn't look for my book. So I just kind of was walking around and going, oh, it's Richard's book. It's like a fabulous thing. So yeah, so thank you, mate. It gives me great joy seeing people, the teacher.
That's it.
We want to see people doing awesome. So you tick that bill for me, my friend.
Excellent. Well, look, thanks again, Andrew, and have a fantastic afternoon.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, mate.
Thank you for listening to the Arete Podcast with Richard Triggs. We frequently feature guests from organisations we are currently recruiting to build the company brand as an attraction strategy for candidates. If you would like to promote your organisation's brand as an employer of choice, please contact Richard directly on 0403 588 517 or via email richardt@areteexecutive.com.au.